The stagecoach wheels had barely stopped turning when the first snowflakes began to fall, and Theresa Randall stepped down onto the frozen mud of Beaver, Utah, with a heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She clutched her carpetbag against her chest like a shield, her eyes darting from face to face in the small crowd that had gathered to watch the stage arrive, searching for the one man she feared most in this world. Her hands trembled not from the December cold that swept down from the mountains in 1883, but from the bone-deep terror that her stepfather had somehow tracked her here, to this remote town nestled in the high desert valley where sagebrush met snow. The driver tossed down her trunk with a thud that made her jump, and she felt the panic rising in her throat like bile. She had spent every cent she had saved over 3 years to buy passage west from St. Louis, fleeing a man whose cruelty had only grown worse after her mother died 6 months ago. The bruises on her ribs had finally healed during the long journey, but the ones on her soul remained raw and bleeding. She stood there in the gathering snow, 20 years old and alone, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake coming to a place where she knew no one and had no prospects. "Miss, you all right?" The station master's voice seemed to come from very far away. Theresa opened her mouth, but no words came out. The snow fell harder now, big wet flakes that stuck to her dark traveling dress and the threadbare shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She could feel the cold seeping through her worn boots, but she could not seem to make her feet move. The other passengers had already scattered to their destinations, leaving her standing alone beside her trunk like an abandoned piece of luggage. That was when she felt it, a presence beside her, warm and solid. She turned to find a man standing there, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his sheepskin coat. His face was weathered from years under the western sun, lines crinkling around eyes the color of summer sky, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch, not from fear this time, but from something she could not name. "You look like you could use some help," he said, his voice low and gentle, the kind of voice that made you think of quiet strength and steady hands. Theresa took an instinctive step back, her body remembering before her mind could catch up. She had learned the hard way that kindness from men often came with strings attached, with demands and expectations and violence when those were not met. She shook her head, not trusting herself to speak, her throat tight with unshed tears. The cowboy did not move closer, respecting the space she had put between them. Instead, he removed his hat, holding it in his hands as the snow dusted his dark hair white. "Name's Marcus Tenley. I own a ranch about 5 miles north of here. I saw you step off that stage looking scared half to death, and I figured you might need a friend." "I do not need anything from you," Theresa managed to say, though her voice came out small and frightened, nothing like the strong tone she had intended. Marcus studied her for a long moment, and she could see him taking in the details, the way she held herself, the fear in her eyes, the tension in every line of her body. When he spoke again, his voice was even softer than before. "I reckon you have got good reason to be afraid, miss. World is not always kind to women traveling alone, but I want you to know something." He took one slow step forward, still holding his hat, still giving her room to run if she needed to. "Fear ends here with me." The words hung in the cold air between them, simple and direct, and something in Theresa's chest loosened just a fraction. She looked into his eyes and saw no deception there, no hidden agenda, just a quiet sincerity that made her want to believe him. But trust was a luxury she could not afford, not anymore. "I have a room reserved at the boarding house," she said, though this was only half true. She had written ahead asking about accommodations, but had received no reply before she left St. Louis. For all she knew, there was no room waiting for her at all. Marcus nodded slowly, replacing his hat on his head. Mrs. Henderson runs that place. It is the white house with green shutters, 3 buildings down on the left. But if you find she has no room, you come to the general store and leave word. My sister Alina runs a boarding house for women at the ranch. Clean beds, good food, and no men allowed in the sleeping quarters. She would be happy to have you. Before Theresa could respond, he bent and lifted her trunk as if it weighed nothing, settling it on his broad shoulder. I will carry this down to Henderson's for you. You should not be hauling heavy loads in your condition. My condition. Theresa's voice rose in alarm. I am not. You are worn out and half frozen, Marcus interrupted gently. That is the condition I meant. He started walking down the muddy street, his boots crunching in the fresh snow, and after a moment's hesitation, Theresa followed. The town of Beaver was smaller than she had imagined. Just one main street lined with wooden buildings that all looked the same in the gathering darkness and falling snow. Lamplight glowed yellow in windows, and she could smell wood smoke and cooking meat, reminding her that she had not eaten since breakfast. A stale biscuit consumed somewhere in the desert before they began climbing into the mountains. Her stomach growled loudly, and she pressed a hand against it, embarrassed. Marcus glanced back at her but said nothing about the noise. Instead, he pointed with his free hand at the various buildings they passed. That is the general store, and next to it is the telegraph office. Sheriff's office is across the street, though we do not have much call for it most days. Doc Fletcher's house is the one with the red door, in case you ever need medical attention. Church meets in the schoolhouse on Sundays. He spoke matter-of-factly, giving her the lay of the land without pushing for any information about her own circumstances. They reached the boarding house, and Marcus set her trunk down on the porch with care. He knocked firmly on the door, then stepped back to wait beside Theresa. She could feel the warmth of him even through the space between them, a solid presence that somehow made the world feel less dangerous than it had 5 minutes ago. The door opened to reveal a thin woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Mrs. Henderson looked Theresa up and down with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Help you? This lady needs a room, Marcus said before Theresa could speak. She rode ahead from St. Louis. Mrs. Henderson's expression did not soften. Got no letter, and I am full up right now. Mining company sent a dozen men through last week, and they have taken all my spare beds. Theresa felt the panic rising again, cold and swift. She had nowhere else to go, no backup plan, no money left for another stage ticket even if she had wanted to run again. She swayed slightly on her feet, lightheaded from hunger and exhaustion and fear. Marcus's hand came to rest gently on her elbow, steadying her. The touch was light enough that she could pull away if she wanted to, but firm enough to hold her upright. Then she will come out to my place, he said calmly. My sister will look after her. I cannot, Theresa whispered. I do not know you. I cannot go to your ranch. He turned to face her, and the kindness in his eyes made something crack inside her chest. I know you are scared. I do not blame you for that, but you are about to fall over where you stand, and it is only going to get colder tonight. My sister Alina is 35 years old, tough as nails, and she does not suffer fools. She runs a tight household, and she has 3 other women staying there right now, all working in town during the day. You will have your own room, your own space, and nobody will bother you. I give you my word. Your word means nothing to me, Theresa said, but the words came out weak and defeated rather than defiant. Then let my actions speak louder, Marcus replied. He picked up her trunk again and carried it to a wagon hitched nearby, loading it carefully into the bed. Then he came back and stood before her, hands loose at his sides, making no move to touch her again. I am going to drive out to my ranch now. You can come with me or you can stay here in town. But if you stay, you are going to spend the night in the cold because Mrs. Henderson has no room and the only other place is the saloon, which I would not recommend for a lady. The choice is yours. I am not going to force you to do anything." Theresa looked at Mrs. Henderson, who had already started to close her door, clearly uninterested in Theresa's predicament. She looked at the darkening street, at the snow falling heavier now, at the few people hurrying to get inside before the storm worsened. She thought about the weeks of travel that had brought her here, about the carefully hoarded money now spent, about the dreams of starting fresh in a place where her stepfather could not find her. She thought about the alternative, which was freezing to death in a town where no one knew her name. "If I do not like it, will you bring me back to town tomorrow?" she asked. "First thing in the morning if you want," Marcus promised. "And if you decide to stay, you can work in the kitchen with Alina, help with the cooking and cleaning, and she will pay you fair wages. You will earn your keep and then some. No charity, just honest work." It was the mention of work that decided her. Theresa had never wanted charity. She had only ever wanted a chance to take care of herself, to build a life that belonged to her alone. She nodded once, sharp and quick, before she could change her mind. Marcus helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand cupping her elbow briefly before releasing her. Then he climbed up beside her, keeping a respectful distance between them, and gathered the reins. The horses started forward at his command, their breath steaming in the cold air, and they rolled out of town into the gathering darkness. The ranch road wound through sagebrush and scattered juniper trees, climbing gradually into the foothills. The snow fell steadily, muffling all sound except the jingle of harness and the creak of wagon wheels. Theresa sat rigid on the seat, her hands clenched in her lap, every muscle tense and ready to fight or flee. But Marcus just drove in silence, occasionally clicking his tongue to encourage the horses, his presence somehow soothing despite her fear. "You do not have to tell me why you are running," he said after a while. "But I want you to know that whatever you left behind, it does not have to follow you here. Beaver is a small town, but folks here mind their own business for the most part. You can build a new life if that is what you want." "How did you know I was running?" Theresa asked, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Because I have seen that look before," Marcus said quietly. "My sister Alina, she came out here 5 years ago looking just like you do now. Her husband used to beat her back in Denver. He beat her so bad one time she lost the baby she was carrying. She waited until he was passed out drunk, took everything she could carry, and got on a train west. She showed up at my door in the middle of the night, terrified he would find her. He never did. She is safe here. She has a life here. And you can too." Theresa felt tears prick her eyes, hot against her cold cheeks. "What if he finds me?" "Then he will have to go through me first," Marcus said simply, "and I do not go down easy." They rounded a bend, and suddenly the ranch spread out before them in the snowy darkness. The main house was a large 2-story building with lamplight glowing in every window, looking warm and welcoming against the winter night. Behind it stood a barn and several outbuildings, all well maintained and solid. Cattle moved in the near pasture, dark shapes against white snow, and horses whinnied a greeting from the corral. A woman appeared on the porch as they pulled up, wrapped in a heavy shawl. Even in the darkness, Theresa could see the resemblance to Marcus in the strong line of her jaw and the set of her shoulders. "This must be Alina." "Brought you a new guest," Marcus called out as he set the brake. "Stage just came in. Mrs. Henderson was full up." Alina came down the steps carefully, her eyes finding Theresa's face in the lamplight that spilled from the house. Whatever she saw there made her expression soften. "You look half frozen, honey. Let us get you inside and warmed up. Marcus, bring her trunk to the spare room upstairs." Before Theresa could protest or thank her or do anything at all, Alina had taken her arm and was guiding her up the steps and into the house. The warmth hit her like a physical thing, and she gasped at the sudden contrast. The entry hall was clean and neat, with hooks for coats and a bench for removing boots. Beyond it, she could see a large parlor with a fire roaring in the stone fireplace, and the delicious smell of stew and fresh bread made her stomach clench with hunger. "Come on, let us get you out of these wet things," Alina said, leading her through the parlor and up a set of stairs. "You are shaking like a leaf. When did you last eat something hot?" "I do not remember," Theresa admitted. Alina made a sound of disapproval. "Well, we will fix that right away. I have stew on the stove and biscuits just coming out of the oven. You will eat, and then we will get you into a warm bed, and everything else can wait until morning." She pushed open a door to reveal a small but comfortable bedroom with a real bed covered in quilts, a washstand with a flowered basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out over the darkening mountains. It was the nicest room Theresa had stayed in since her mother died, maybe even before that. She felt tears threaten again and blinked them back furiously. "Now then," Alina said briskly, turning to face her. "My brother tells me you came in on the stage from St. Louis. That is a long journey. You must be exhausted. There is a washroom at the end of the hall with a real bathtub. I will heat water for you after supper if you want to wash up. In the meantime, I have got some spare clothes that might fit you. We are about the same size, I think." She paused, her expression gentling. "You are safe here, honey. Whatever you are afraid of, it is not going to find you in this house. You have my word on that." It was almost the same thing Marcus had said, and hearing it again from this strong, capable woman made something inside Theresa finally break. The tears came hot and fast, and she could not stop them, could not hold back the sob that tore from her throat. She stood there in the middle of the strange bedroom and cried like she had not cried since her mother's funeral, cried for all the fear and pain and loneliness of the past 6 months. Alina pulled her into a firm embrace, patting her back the way a mother might comfort a child. "There now, let it out. You have been holding that in for too long, I wager. Let it all out." Theresa cried until her throat was raw and her eyes burned until there were no tears left inside her. Alina held her through all of it, steady and patient, not asking any questions or demanding any explanations. When the storm finally passed, she handed Theresa a clean handkerchief and guided her to sit on the edge of the bed. "Better?" Alina asked. Theresa nodded, wiping her eyes. "I am sorry. I do not usually fall apart like that. Nothing to apologize for. Sometimes we need to fall apart before we can put ourselves back together stronger." Alina studied her for a moment. "What is your name, honey?" "Theresa. Theresa Randall." "Well, Theresa Randall, welcome to the Tenley Ranch. Now let us get some food into you before you collapse entirely." Downstairs, the kitchen was warm and fragrant. 3 other women sat around a long wooden table, and they looked up with curiosity as Alina led Theresa in. Alina made quick introductions. Sarah, a widow who worked at the general store, Catherine, who taught at the school, and young Margaret, who helped Doc Fletcher. They all greeted Theresa with friendly smiles that seemed genuine rather than forced. Marcus appeared in the doorway, having brought in Theresa's trunk and settled it in her room. He had removed his coat and hat, and she could see that he was younger than she had first thought, probably not more than 28 or 30. His dark hair was still damp from the snow, and there was something about the way he moved, economical and sure, that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Alina, I am heading back out to check on the cattle in the north pasture," he said. "Storm is getting worse, and I want to make sure they have got shelter." "You be careful," Alina warned, And take Joseph with you. I do not want you out there alone in this weather." Marcus nodded and disappeared again. Theresa found herself staring at the empty doorway, feeling oddly bereft at his departure. He had been kind to her, kinder than she had any right to expect from a stranger, and some part of her had begun to trust him despite her better judgment. Alina set a bowl of stew in front of her, along with 2 thick slices of buttered bread and a cup of hot coffee. "Eat," she commanded. "You look like you have not had a decent meal in weeks." Theresa ate, trying to pace herself but failing miserably. The stew was rich and savory, full of beef and vegetables, and the bread was soft and warm. She could not remember the last time food had tasted so good. The other women chatted around her, talking about their days, and gradually she began to relax in the comfortable domesticity of it all. After supper, Alina heated water for a bath as promised, and Theresa soaked in the tub until her skin turned pink and her muscles finally loosened. She washed her hair with soap that smelled like lavender and let herself imagine, just for a moment, that this could be her life. That she could stay in this place where people were kind, and the food was hot, and nobody raised their hand in anger. That night, she lay in the soft bed under heavy quilts and listened to the wind howl outside. She thought about Marcus Tenley and his quiet promise that fear ended with him. She thought about Alina and the other women who had welcomed her without asking questions. She thought about the long journey that had brought her here and the uncertain future that stretched ahead. And for the first time in 6 months, she fell asleep without fear chasing her into nightmares. Morning came gray and cold, the world outside transformed into a white wonderland. Theresa woke to the smell of coffee and bacon and the sound of voices downstairs. She dressed quickly in the spare clothes Alina had left for her, a simple calico dress that fit reasonably well, and made her way to the kitchen. The other women had already left for their jobs in town, and Alina stood at the stove flipping pancakes. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Theresa admitted. "Glad to hear it. There is coffee on the counter and breakfast will be ready in just a minute. After we eat, I thought we could talk about what you want to do." "Marcus said he told you about working here in exchange for room and board. The offer stands if you want it, but there is no pressure. If you would rather find something else, I can help you look." Theresa poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the table. Through the kitchen window, she could see the snow-covered yard and, beyond it, the mountains rising stark and beautiful against the pale sky. "I would like to stay, if you truly do not mind. I can cook and clean and sew. I am a hard worker." "I do not doubt that for a second," Alina said, sliding pancakes onto a plate and setting them in front of Theresa. "But I want you to understand something. This is not charity and it is not a favor. I need help running this place and you need a job. That makes us equals, you understand? You earn your keep, and I pay you fair wages on top of room and board. When you have saved up enough money if you want to move on, that is your choice. But you will always have a place here as long as you want it." "Thank you," Theresa said, her voice thick with emotion. "You do not know what this means to me." "I think I have got a pretty good idea," Alina replied gently. "Like I said, I have been where you are. I know what it is like to run and to be scared and to not know if you will ever feel safe again. But you will, Theresa, I promise you that. It takes time, but you will get there." They fell into an easy routine over the following days. Theresa helped with the cooking and cleaning, washed clothes and mended torn seams, and gradually began to learn the rhythm of ranch life. The work was hard but satisfying, and she fell into bed each night pleasantly exhausted rather than worn down. The other women became her friends, sharing their stories and their laughter, creating a community of women who looked out for one another. Marcus was a frequent presence at the house, coming in for meals and to check on various things around the property. He was always polite to Theresa, always respectful of her space, but she noticed the way his eyes would find her across the room, the way he would smile slightly when she said something that amused him. She noticed, too, the way her heart would speed up when he walked into a room, the way she found herself listening for his voice among the others. 2 weeks after her arrival, Marcus asked if she would like to go riding with him to check on the cattle. Theresa hesitated, old fears rising up to choke her, but Alina gave her an encouraging nod. "Go on, honey. It will do you good to get out of the house for a bit. And Marcus is the best rider in 3 counties. You will be safe with him." So Theresa found herself bundled in a borrowed coat and climbing onto a gentle mare named Daisy, following Marcus out across the snowy pastures. The world was breathtakingly beautiful in its winter dress, everything clean and white and sparkling in the weak sunlight. Her breath steamed in the cold air, and her cheeks burned from the wind, but she felt more alive than she had in months. Marcus rode beside her on a big chestnut gelding, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the ranch. He had inherited it from his father 10 years ago, he explained, when both parents died in a flu epidemic. He had been only 20 years old then, barely more than a boy, but he had worked hard and built the place into one of the most successful operations in the valley. When Alina had shown up 5 years later, fleeing her abusive husband, he had built the boarding house specifically to give her a way to be independent and to help other women who found themselves in similar circumstances. "Why do you do it?" Theresa asked as they paused on a ridge overlooking the valley. "Help women like us, I mean. Most men would not bother." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the distant mountains. "My mother was one of the strongest women I ever knew," he said finally. "She worked from sunup to sundown keeping this ranch going, raising me and Alina, taking care of my father when he got sick. But I remember, when I was about 10 years old, we had a neighbor whose husband beat her. Everyone knew it, but nobody did anything about it. One day she showed up at our door with her face all swollen and bruised, begging my mother for help. My mother took her in, let her stay with us for a week. When the husband came looking for her, my father met him at the gate with a shotgun and told him he was not welcome on our land." He paused, his jaw tight. "The woman went back to her husband eventually. She said she had nowhere else to go. 3 months later, she was dead. He claimed she fell down the stairs, but everyone knew the truth. I was just a kid, but I swore then that if I ever had the means, I would help women get away from men like that. I would give them somewhere safe to go." Theresa felt tears sting her eyes. "That is a good thing you are doing." "It is the right thing," Marcus corrected gently. He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "You deserve better than whatever you left behind, Theresa. You deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. You deserve to build the life you want without fear." "I want to believe that," she whispered. "Then believe it," he said firmly. "And if you cannot believe it yet, then trust that I believe it for you until you can believe it yourself." They rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, but something had shifted between them. Theresa felt it, a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the cold winter air and everything to do with the man riding beside her. It scared her, this feeling, because caring about someone meant giving them the power to hurt you. But it also filled her with a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, not all men were like her stepfather. Maybe there were good men in the world, men like Marcus Tenley, who kept their promises and treated women with dignity. Christmas came and went, a joyful affair with all the women at the ranch gathering to exchange small gifts and share an enormous feast. Theresa had used some of her first wages to buy fabric in town, and had sewn handkerchiefs for everyone, embroidering their initials in careful stitches. Eleanor had given her a warm wool coat, practical and beautiful, and the other women had contributed gloves and scarves and a lovely blue ribbon for her hair. Marcus had given her a leather-bound journal with blank pages. "For writing down your thoughts," he had said quietly when she opened it. "Or for starting over, writing a new story for yourself. Whatever you want it to be." She had not known what to say, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. She had managed to choke out a thank you before retreating upstairs to her room, where she sat on the bed and traced the smooth leather cover with trembling fingers. That night, she wrote her first entry. "Today I feel almost happy. I did not think I would ever feel this way again." Winter deepened, and the world outside turned harsh and unforgiving. But inside the ranch house, life continued warm and comfortable. Theresa grew stronger, the haunted look fading from her eyes, her laughter coming more easily. She and Marcus fell into a pattern of riding together twice a week when weather permitted, and those hours became the highlight of her days. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their hopes and fears and dreams, building a foundation of friendship that slowly began to transform into something deeper. It was Marcus who finally acknowledged what was growing between them. They had ridden out to check on a line of fence damaged by the winter storms, and as they worked together to repair the broken posts, he suddenly stopped and turned to face her. "Theresa, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. She looked up at him, her heart suddenly racing. "What is it?" "I care about you," he said bluntly. "More than I should, maybe. More than is smart, given that you have been through hell and probably are not ready for any man to be telling you such things. But I am not good at hiding my feelings, and it does not seem right to pretend I do not feel what I feel." Theresa stood frozen, the hammer hanging loose in her hand. Part of her wanted to run, to put distance between herself and these dangerous feelings. But another part, a stronger part, wanted to step closer to see where this could lead. "I am scared," she admitted. "I am scared of caring about someone again. I am scared of trusting wrong. I am scared that I am broken in ways that cannot be fixed." Marcus took a careful step toward her, moving slowly so she would not feel trapped. "You are not broken, Theresa. You are healing, and that is not the same thing. And I am not asking you for anything you are not ready to give. I just wanted you to know how I feel, so there are no secrets between us. If all you want from me is friendship, I will accept that and be grateful for it. But if there is any part of you that thinks maybe, someday, you might want more than that, then I will wait as long as it takes." She looked into his eyes and saw nothing but honesty and patience and a kindness so profound it made her ache. "I think," she said slowly, "that I might want more than friendship, but I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to let someone close without being terrified they will hurt me." "Then we will figure it out together," Marcus said simply. "We will go slow, we will take it one day at a time. And if you ever get scared or need space, you just tell me and I will back off. No hard feelings, no pressure. You set the pace and I will follow your lead." "Why are you so patient with me?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Because you are worth being patient for," he replied. "Because I look at you and I see strength and courage and kindness, and I think to myself that if I could spend the rest of my life earning your trust, it would be time well spent." Theresa felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked tight and frozen for so long. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them, and reached out to touch his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused and steady, and she felt the truth of his words in that simple contact. "Fear ends here with you," she whispered, echoing the words he had spoken to her that first snowy night. "I want to believe that." Then let me prove it to you, Marcus said. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and sweet it made her heart turn over in her chest. One day at a time, Theresa. We will take it one day at a time. They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, and that night Theresa wrote in her journal, "Today I think I started to fall in love. It terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure. But for the first time, I think I might be brave enough to try." The weeks that followed were a revelation. Marcus courted her with a patience and gentleness that slowly eroded her fears. He brought her wildflowers when the first brave blooms pushed up through the melting snow. He sat with her on the porch in the evenings, talking or simply existing in comfortable silence. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, never made her feel obligated or trapped. Lena watched their growing romance with obvious approval. "He is a good man, my brother," she told Theresa one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen. "One of the best I have ever known. He will treat you right." "I know," Theresa said softly. "That is what scares me. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop for him to show his true colors, but he just keeps being kind." "That is his true colors, honey," Lena said firmly. "Not all men are like the one you left behind. Some of them are decent human beings who understand that women are people deserving of respect. Marcus is one of those. You can trust him with your heart." Spring arrived in a rush of green and color, and with it came Theresa's 21st birthday. She had not mentioned it to anyone, but somehow Marcus found out, and he planned a celebration that brought tears to her eyes. All the women from the ranch and half the town showed up for a party complete with music and dancing, and a cake that Alina had baked and decorated with real sugar flowers. As the sun set and the party wound down, Marcus took Theresa's hand and led her out to the porch. The night was warm and clear, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I have something I want to ask you," he said. "But I want you to know that you can say no and nothing will change between us. You will still have your place here, still have your job and your room. This changes nothing unless you want it to." Theresa's heart began to pound. "What is it?" Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small but perfect sapphire, the color of his eyes, the color of the summer sky. "Theresa Randall, I love you. I have loved you since that first night when I saw you standing in the snow looking scared and brave at the same time. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you laugh when something genuinely surprises you. I love the way you care for the other women here and the way you sing when you think no one is listening. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you every single day." He took a breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be the man who stands beside you, who protects you and cherishes you and loves you for the rest of our days? I promise you, Theresa, I will never raise my hand to you in anger. I will never make you afraid. I will spend every day of our lives making sure you feel safe and loved and valued. All I ask is that you give me the chance to show you what love should really look like." Theresa felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. She looked at this good man who had kept every promise he had ever made to her, who had shown her through his actions that not all men were cruel, that love did not have to hurt. She thought about the scared woman who had stepped off the stage 6 months ago, and she realized with sudden clarity that she was not that woman anymore. She had healed, had grown stronger, had learned to trust again. And she had done it here in this place, with this man. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, more certain. "Yes, I will marry you, Marcus Tenley. I love you too. I think I started loving you that first night when you told me fear ended with you. You kept that promise, and I believe you will keep this one too." Marcus let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing and crying at the same time. He set her down gently and slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her for the first time, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was nothing like the rough, demanding kisses she had experienced before. This was a kiss that asked rather than took, that cherished rather than claimed, and she found herself kissing him back with all the love and hope that had been building in her heart. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, on a perfect June morning when the mountains were green and the valley was carpeted in wildflowers. The ceremony was held at the ranch, with the whole town in attendance. Theresa wore a dress that Alina and the other women had helped her make, white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, and she carried a bouquet of the wildflowers that Marcus had been bringing her all spring. As she walked toward him across the grass, she saw the love shining in his eyes and felt her own heart swell in response. The preacher spoke about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage, but Theresa barely heard the words. She was too focused on the man standing before her, this cowboy who had taken her hand when she was most afraid and had shown her that her fear truly could end with him. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed her sweetly in front of everyone, and Theresa felt a joy so complete it seemed impossible that she had ever been afraid. They celebrated late into the evening with food and music and dancing, and when the last guest finally departed, Marcus carried her over the threshold of the small house he had built for them, set back from the main ranch buildings to give them privacy. He set her down gently in the front room, and they stood there looking at each other, suddenly shy. "Are you scared?" Marcus asked softly. "A little," Theresa admitted, "but not of you, just of the unknown." "We will figure it out together," he promised, just like everything else, and they did. Marcus was patient and gentle on their wedding night, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When she tensed at certain touches, remembering old pain, he would stop and hold her until she relaxed again. He showed her that physical love could be tender and mutual, something shared between equals rather than something taken by force. By the time morning light filtered through their bedroom window, Theresa felt like she had finally left her old life behind completely. She had been reborn into this new existence where she was loved and valued and safe. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. There were times when Theresa would wake from nightmares about her stepfather, convinced he had found her. Marcus would hold her through those dark hours, reminding her that she was safe, that he was there, that no one would ever hurt her again. There were times when his casual touches would make her flinch before she could stop herself, and she would see the pain flash across his face before he carefully gave her space. But they worked through each challenge together, building trust brick by careful brick, creating a foundation strong enough to last a lifetime. Theresa threw herself into life on the ranch, working alongside Marcus and learning all aspects of running a cattle operation. She had a natural head for numbers and took over managing the ranch accounts, discovering she had a talent for business. She also continued helping Alina at the boarding house, determined to pay forward the kindness that had been shown to her. When new women arrived, scared and running from their own demons, Theresa was there to welcome them, to tell them her story, to show them living proof that healing was possible. In the spring of 1885, Theresa discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had never imagined herself as a mother, had spent so many years just trying to survive that she had not let herself dream of a future that included children. But Marcus was thrilled, already planning all the things he would teach their child, whether boy or girl. His enthusiasm was infectious, and gradually Theresa allowed herself to be excited too. The pregnancy was difficult. Theresa was sick for the first 4 months, barely able to keep anything down. Marcus hovered worriedly, bringing her weak tea and dry toast, sitting with her when the nausea was at its worst. Doc Fletcher came out to the ranch regularly to check on her, assuring them that everything was progressing normally despite her discomfort. As her belly grew round, Theresa found herself marveling at the miracle of it. There was a life growing inside her, a tiny person who would be half her and half Marcus, a visible symbol of their love. She would sit on the porch in the evenings with Marcus's hand resting on her stomach, feeling the baby kick and tumble, and think about how far she had come from that terrified woman stepping off the stage into the snow. Labor came in October, 3 weeks before they expected it. Theresa woke in the middle of the night with pains low in her back, and by the time the sun rose, she was in full labor. Eleanor and Doc Fletcher attended her while Marcus paced anxiously downstairs. The labor was long and hard, lasting nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when Theresa thought she could not endure another second of the pain. But Eleanor held her hand and talked her through each contraction, reminding her to breathe, telling her she was strong enough to do this. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, their son entered the world with a furious cry that spoke of strong lungs and an even stronger will. Doc Fletcher placed the baby in Theresa's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, red-faced infant and fell instantly, completely in love. Marcus came bursting into the room moments later, his face pale with worry that transformed into wonder when he saw his wife and child. "We have a son," Theresa said, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus, we have a son." Marcus sat carefully on the edge of the bed and wrapped his arms around both of them, his own eyes wet. "He is perfect," he said hoarsely. "You are perfect. Thank you, Theresa. Thank you for this gift." They named him Matthew, and he became the center of their world. He was a good baby, quick to smile and slow to fuss, and he brought a new dimension of joy to their lives. Theresa discovered that motherhood came more naturally to her than she had expected. She was patient with Matthew's midnight cries and endless needs, finding satisfaction in caring for this tiny person who depended on her completely. Marcus was a devoted father, taking Matthew with him around the ranch as soon as the baby was old enough, teaching him about horses and cattle and the land. Theresa would watch them together, man and boy, and feel her heart overflow with gratitude for the life she had built here. The years passed in a sweet rhythm of seasons and milestones. Matthew took his first steps on a sunny spring morning, chasing after a barn cat. He said his first word, which was horse, much to Marcus's delight. When he was 3, Theresa became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter arrived on a perfect summer day, and they named her Mary after Marcus's mother. She had Theresa's dark hair and Marcus's blue eyes, and from the moment she could talk, she followed her big brother everywhere. Life on the ranch flourished. The cattle operation expanded, and they added horses to their stock, breeding quality mounts that were sought after throughout the territory. Theresa's business acumen helped them weather the various economic downturns that affected other ranchers, and by 1890, they were one of the most prosperous operations in southern Utah. Eleanor remained at the ranch, running the boarding house that had now helped dozens of women start new lives. She had become something of a legend in the territory, the woman who provided safe haven for those fleeing violence and abuse. The ranch had evolved into more than just a cattle operation. It was a community, a place of healing and hope. When Matthew was 8 and Mary was 5, Theresa received a letter that made her blood run cold. It was from an attorney in St. Louis, informing her that her stepfather had died. He had apparently drunk himself to death over the course of several years, dying alone and unmourned. The letter requested that she return to Missouri to settle his estate, such as it was. Theresa sat with the letter in her hands, waiting for the fear to come, for the old terror to rise up and choke her. But it did not come. Instead, she felt only a distant sadness for the waste of a life, for a man who had been so consumed by his own demons that he had taken out his pain on those weaker than himself. She felt pity for him, which surprised her, and a profound gratitude that she had escaped before he could destroy her completely. Marcus found her on the porch that evening, staring out at the mountains painted gold by the setting sun. He sat beside her and took her hand, not saying anything, just being present. Finally, Theresa showed him the letter. "I do not feel anything," she said, surprised by her own words. "I thought I would feel relief or joy that he is dead, but I just feel empty about it." "That is because he has no power over you anymore," Marcus said quietly. "He has not had power over you for years now. You built a whole new life without him in it. His death does not change anything because he was already dead to you." Theresa realized he was right. She had let go of her stepfather and all he represented long ago. She had healed from the wounds he inflicted, had learned to trust and love again, had created a family and a home filled with safety and joy. He was simply irrelevant to her life now. "I do not want to go to Missouri," she said. "I do not want anything he left behind. This is my home now. You and the children, Alina and the ranch, this is my life. Then we will write to the attorney and tell him to handle the estate however he sees fit," Marcus said. "You do not owe that man anything, Theresa. Not even the effort of settling his affairs." So that is what they did. Marcus wrote a brief letter instructing the attorney to sell whatever assets existed and distribute the proceeds to charity. Theresa never looked back, never wondered what might have been different if she had stayed in Missouri. She knew with absolute certainty that running away that cold December day in 1883 had been the best decision she had ever made. More children followed. Another son, Michael, arrived when Mary was 3, and 2 years after that came twin girls, Martha and Mabel, who kept everyone on their toes with their boundless energy and mischief. The house that Marcus had built for them was expanded twice to accommodate their growing family, and it rang with the noise and chaos of children and life and love. Theresa became known throughout the territory not just as Marcus Tenley's wife, but as a businesswoman in her own right. She used her head for numbers to help other ranchers manage their operations, and she became an advocate for women's education and rights. She never forgot where she had come from, the terror and helplessness she had felt, and she was determined to help other women find their own strength and independence. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Marcus took Theresa back to the spot where he had first proposed. It was a warm June evening, and they left the children with Alina and rode out across the pastures to watch the sunset. They sat on the same porch where he had offered her the sapphire ring, and Marcus pulled her close against his side. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Choosing this life, choosing me?" Theresa looked at him in surprise. "How could I possibly regret the best decision I ever made? Marcus, you saved my life, not just by taking me in that first night, but by showing me what love really is. You taught me that I was worthy of kindness and respect. You gave me a home and a family and a future. How could I regret any of that?" "I just want to make sure you are happy," Marcus said. "That is all I have ever wanted from that first moment I saw you in the snow. Your happiness matters more to me than anything else in this world." "I am happy," Theresa assured him. "I am so happy I sometimes cannot believe this is my real life. When I think about that scared girl who stepped off the stage 12 years ago, it almost feels like a different person. She was so broken and afraid, and now look at me. I am strong and confident, and surrounded by people I love who love me back. That is all because of you, Marcus, because you saw something worth saving in me when I could not see it in myself. I saw what was always there, Marcus corrected gently. You saved yourself, Theresa. I just gave you a safe place to do it. They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. After all these years, his kiss still made her heart race, still filled her with warmth and certainty and love. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. Matthew showed an aptitude for ranching and a deep love of the land, and everyone knew he would take over the operation someday. Mary was spirited and independent, declaring at age 10 that she wanted to be a doctor like Doc Fletcher. Michael was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to horses, and the twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into elaborate schemes that kept their parents on their toes. Theresa and Marcus weathered the challenges of raising 5 children with patience and humor. There were illnesses and injuries, tears and triumphs, the normal struggles of any family. But through it all, they remained a united front, supporting each other and their children with unwavering love. Elena remained a central part of their lives, watching her nieces and nephews grow up with pride. She never remarried, declaring that she was happy with her independence and her work helping other women. The boarding house continued to thrive, and by 1900 it had gained a reputation throughout the West as a place where women in trouble could find refuge and assistance. As the new century dawned, Theresa found herself looking back on the nearly 20 years since she had arrived in Beaver. So much had changed, not just in her own life but in the world around them. Utah had become a state in 1896, bringing new opportunities and challenges. The railroad had expanded, making travel easier and connecting their remote valley to the larger world. The ranch had grown beyond anything Marcus's parents could have imagined, a testament to hard work and smart management. But the core of their life remained the same: family, community, and the land that sustained them all. Theresa had made a home here in this harsh but beautiful place, had built a life richer and fuller than anything she had dared to dream of during those dark days in Missouri. On a snowy December evening in 1903, exactly 20 years after her arrival, Theresa stood on the porch of the main ranch house watching snow fall just as it had that first night. Marcus came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come," Theresa said softly. 20 years ago tonight, I stepped off that stage into the snow, so scared I could barely breathe. And you were there, a stranger offering kindness when I expected none. You told me fear ended with you, and you have spent the past 20 years proving that true. Best decision I ever made, walking up to that stage, Marcus said. You changed my life, Theresa. Made me want to be better, do better. Gave me a family and a purpose beyond just running cattle. I love you more today than I did when I married you, and I loved you plenty then. I love you too, Theresa whispered. Thank you for being patient with me, for giving me time to heal, for never giving up on me even when I was difficult and scared. You were never difficult, Marcus said firmly. You were hurt and learning to trust again. That is not the same thing. He turned her in his arms so they were face to face. You are the strongest person I know, Theresa Tenley. You survived things that would have broken a lesser person, and you came out the other side with your kindness and your capacity for love intact. You are remarkable. They stood together in the falling snow, holding each other as they had held each other through 2 decades of joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. Inside the warm house, they could hear their children laughing, Mary playing piano while the twins sang along badly and the boys argued good-naturedly about something. It was the sound of home, of family, of a life well lived. The years continued their steady march forward. Matthew married a rancher's daughter from the next valley over and brought her home to the ranch. They gave Theresa and Marcus their first grandchild, a boy they named Marcus after his grandfather, and watching Marcus hold his grandson for the first time made Theresa's eyes fill with happy tears. Mary did indeed become a doctor, studying in Salt Lake City and returning to Beaver to take over Doc Fletcher's practice when he retired. Michael became a teacher, using his love of books and learning to educate the next generation. The twins opened a dress shop together in town, their designs sought after by fashionable women throughout the territory. Eleanor lived to see all her nieces and nephews grown and settled, but she passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1910, surrounded by the women she had helped over the years. Her funeral was the largest Beaver had ever seen, attended by dozens of women whose lives she had saved or changed. Theresa spoke at the service, her voice strong and clear as she told the story of how Eleanor had taken her in without question, had shown her what female strength and solidarity looked like. "She taught me that we are stronger together," Theresa said. "That women helping women can change the world one life at a time. She gave me a home when I had nowhere to go, and she showed me how to be brave. I will never forget her, and neither should any of us. The best way to honor her memory is to continue her work, to help those who need it, to create safe spaces for women who are running from violence and fear." After Eleanor's death, Theresa took over running the boarding house, determined to continue the legacy her sister-in-law had built. She was now in her late 40s, her dark hair threaded with silver, but she was still strong and capable. She poured her energy into the work, and the boarding house thrived under her management. Marcus was now in his 50s, his dark hair gone completely gray, but he was still vigorous and active. Together they had built an empire of sorts, not just the successful ranch but a network of support and community that touched countless lives. They were respected throughout southern Utah, known as much for their generosity and fairness as for their business acumen. Their 50th wedding anniversary in 1935 was celebrated with a party that drew people from 3 counties. All 5 of their children were there with their families, giving Theresa and Marcus a total of 14 grandchildren and counting. The ranch that had once been run by Marcus alone now employed 3 of his sons and 2 sons-in-law, a true family operation. As Theresa looked around at the celebration, at all the faces of people she loved and who loved her back, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought about the terrified young woman who had arrived in Beaver 52 years ago with nothing but a carpet bag and a heart full of fear. That woman would not have believed this future was possible, would not have dared to hope for so much happiness. Marcus found her standing alone for a moment, watching the festivities. He took her hand, his fingers still familiar and comforting after all these years. His blue eyes, though faded with age, still held the same kindness that had captured her heart so long ago. "Happy anniversary, my love," he said softly. "Happy anniversary," Theresa replied. 50 years. Can you believe it? Best 50 years of my life," Marcus said simply. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "So would I," Theresa agreed. She leaned into him, and they stood together watching their family celebrate, 2 people who had found each other on a snowy winter night and had built a life together that exceeded all dreams. The years had been kind to them, filled with more joy than sorrow, more triumphs than failures. They had raised good children who were raising good children of their own. They had built a legacy that would outlast them, not just in the ranch that would pass down through generations, but in the lives they had touched and the kindness they had shown. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Theresa and Marcus found themselves alone in the house where they had raised their family. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom, moving more slowly now but still hand in hand, still together as they had been through everything. Marcus helped Theresa out of her party dress, his hands gentle as they had always been. They changed into their night clothes and climbed into bed, and Marcus pulled Theresa close against his chest the way he had done every night for 50 years. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "More than words can say." "I love you too," Theresa whispered back. "Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for making fear end with you." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who had found their home in each other. Marcus Tenley died peacefully in his sleep in 1938 at the age of 83. Theresa held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke at losing him, she was grateful that he went gently, without pain or fear. His funeral was another massive affair, with people traveling from all over to pay their respects to a man who had been a pillar of his community. Theresa lived another 5 years after Marcus's death, remaining active in running the boarding house and spending time with her ever-growing family. She told her stories to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, wanting them to know where they came from and what their family stood for. She told them about arriving in Beaver afraid and alone, about the cowboy who had offered her his hand and promised that fear ended with him, about building a life and a family through hard work and love. On a quiet spring morning, in 1943, Theresa passed away in her sleep at the age of 80. Her children found her in her bed, peaceful and still, a slight smile on her weathered face. On her nightstand was the leather journal Marcus had given her all those years ago, filled with decades of thoughts and memories and gratitude. The last entry, written the night before she died, reads simply, "I have lived a good life, better than I deserved, richer than I dreamed. I loved and was loved in return. I was brave when I needed to be and found safe harbor when I was not. Soon I will see my Marcus again, and we will continue our story in whatever comes next. But for now I am content. I am happy, and I am no longer afraid." They buried her beside Marcus in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked by simple stones that bore their names and dates and the words "Together always." The boarding house continued operating for many more decades, run first by Mary and then by her daughter, helping generations of women find safety and new beginnings. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through Matthew's line, the legacy of two people who had found each other in the snow and built something lasting. And on winter nights when the snow fell soft and steady, when the mountains turned white and the valley lay quiet under a blanket of frozen stars, people would sometimes tell the story of Theresa Randall, who arrived afraid, and Marcus Tenley, who took her hand. They told how he promised that fear ended with him, and how he spent the rest of his life keeping that promise. They told how she found her courage and her strength, how she built a new life from the ashes of the old one. They told it as a love story, which it was, but also as a story about healing and hope, and the power of choosing kindness over cruelty. The story became part of the fabric of Beaver, Utah, woven into the history of the place as surely as the mountains and the desert and the snow that fell each winter. It reminded people that sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, that strangers can become family, that fear truly can end if you are brave enough to trust the right person. It reminded them that love, real love, is patient and kind and strong enough to heal even the deepest wounds. And so the story lived on, passed down through generations, a testament to the cowboy and the woman who found each other in the snow and built a legacy of love that would never be forgotten. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the land they loved, still tell their story on snowy winter nights, still believe in the power of taking someone's hand and promising that their fear ends here.